midlife crisis. And what he didn't tell me was that the reason, I thought it was just a general interest story about aging, because we've done several of those before. And what he didn't tell me was what prompted the story was that the county sheriff had just retired early because he described himself as a midlife crisis. So this is a lead-in, and then it says, and Dr. Knight says that, in fact, there's not a general phenomenon of midlife crisis. It's only neurotic men who. So I just called the county, we immediately passed county sheriff neurotic.
Fortunately, he was no longer sheriff.
I was happy about that. I wasn't very happy about the quote. Not the first or last time that things got tangled up.
Maybe I wasn't listening. What did you say about the hypochondria?
It was commonly believed. I hope less so now, although I'm not so sure. Medical circles, non-gero-specific medical circles anyway, sometimes even gero-specialists, but that's another story. People get frustrated by the fact that older people show up with often sort of non-specific complaints about physical problems and without the physical signs of diseases that you're taught to look for when you're trained on young and middle-aged people. And so it turns out, both like psychologists and everybody else in the health and human services professions, a lot of physicians get trained on young and middle-aged people, mostly with acute diseases. And then in practice, they mostly end up working with older people with chronic diseases. And it turns out, of course, both that your chronic disease at any age doesn't present exactly like acute diseases. And then as you get older, disease presentations often change. And so older people don't always experience the same kinds of signs and symptoms in the same sharp and pronounced way that younger patients present with. But in their clinical training by older non-geriatric trainers, a lot of them get taught to think of this as hypochondria. There used to be, I hope it's died out, but I sort of doubt it, an expression that older people were referred to as GOMERS, which turns out to be an acronym for Get Out of My Emergency Room. And so, and there was a widespread belief, sometimes explicitly taught, and other times implicitly taught, that in fact there's this increase in hypochondria with age, and Costa and McRae used the stability of neuroticism going into late life. And as you saw in several samples, there's even a mean level decline in neuroticism going into late life, as an argument that older adults were certainly no more neurotic at that time. I think now you have even more evidence that they would probably be. I should have said myself, it's the mistake I told you guys, I was trying to keep people not to think. No more high on neuroticism. And if anything, probably lower in neuroticism than younger and middle-aged adults. And so would be no more likely and maybe less likely to be hypochondriacal. And they also went on in the same paper to show that the most, what physicians reported as the most common symptoms that older adults came up with, physical symptoms that were signs of this hypochondriasis, corresponded exactly to the chronic illnesses that older adults have more of. So things that were related to diabetes, arthritis, cardiovascular disease, and chronic presentations. But also, argue that extended conscientiousness would be an important element in work settings, that this is like yet another reason why older adults might make better workers in spite of some of the cognitive, micro-level cognitive changes. And in fact, older adults tend to have better attendance records at work and tend to make fewer mistakes. in jobs where that's easy to monitor. Which young people can often achieve at the same level of productivity by doing more things and throwing away the mistakes. So they end up with about equal productivity, in fact, if they get it in different rails. You know, if you think that, on average, the extent that people think that older people are crabby, ornery old men and so forth, that, you know, the literature on agreeableness and increases in agreeableness with age would argue, at least on a group level basis, that would be the case. Now, of course, as was true, you saw some of these spaghetti graphs with sort of intellectual functioning stuff. That would be true for all of this, too. You actually see the underlying graphs for the individual level change in HLM, of the individual patterns in all directions. Spaghetti thrown on the floor kind of thing. but these are kind of, you know, to the extent that there are general patterns of change. Any other thoughts about personality? I saved the shy data just in case we want to raise questions about it. That'll be part of the presentation.
Can we see?
It's in your book, too.
Oh, we haven't read the chapter yet. I guess it's for next week.
That's this one.
It is?
Yeah?
No.
I come and do the wrong lecture?
I don't know.
This is what I was referring to earlier, the neuroticism in the sample actually goes up for most of adult life. Agreeableness actually comes down.
What chapter is it? It's not on here.
Hello? No, it should be. I'm not arguing.
No, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be confrontational. Maybe I'm reading something wrong. It's been known to happen.
I think I accidentally dropped it. That's too bad. Maybe I dropped it because it was contradictory.
What chapter is it?
Yeah,
It's the first chapter, well, the shy chapter, I think is the first content chapter, in Laidlaw and Knight.
Okay.
So it's the one that does the overview. Oh, it might be in the intelligence, because most of the chapter is about intelligence. That's what it is. I was
okay, I thought it was another chapter.
I was thinking, no, that's the
we read it
same.
on the 24th.
Yeah, the end,
Okay.
let's go back a minute. The end of the chapter is about personality, and so these figures come from the end of that chapter. The bulk of the chapter is about intelligence, and so that's what it is in the syllabus. And I was actually misremembering that it was also assigned for Jay, since it was on my mind today. You actually read it a few weeks ago. So there is rather less agreement across things on personality than there is intelligence. With this sense, at least, of correlational stability, and for most people, since like neuroticism coming down, agreeableness and conscientiousness going up at least a little, is what even the people that are reporting countervailing evidence report as being that's kind of the literature consensus. Anything else people want to know? Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on sort of pop culture, like personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs?
Oh, yeah. The Myers-Briggs is a great example of a test that has somehow survived and been intensely popular in a lot of, like, both in kind of pop psych, personal discovery sort of books and training, and also somehow in business. It's used a lot in consulting and business training, and I think even some business decision making. I don't know anybody in the science of clinical psychology who thinks this work the paper is good enough.